An honor and a great pleasure to be here with you this Saturday afternoon. Actually, I am, of course, dedicate my presentation to Professor Ruth Makridis. She was one of the very first scholars who actually turned their interest to the works and lives of the people who actually created, in fact, the Byzantine Research Fund archive of the British School. And I do very much hope that she enjoys my presentation today from wherever she is right now. She very, very much wanted this presentation to be heard in Symposium, and I am indeed grateful to Professor Brubaker, who actually invited me to give this lecture. I would also like to thank Professor John Bennett, the director of British School Athens, as well as Maria Kakissis, the archivist of the British School, who actually supported and facilitated my research on the BRF archive for many years now. So I'm going to talk to you today about Byzantine monuments and nature, their relation to nature, as this is reflected in recordings of the so-called BRF archive of the British School. Now, the extract that you read on your screens comes from William Morris' Gothic Architecture, a lecture which was delivered at least on 4 instances between February and November 1889 at various venues in London. Morris' exaggerated paradigm reflects the arts and crafts attitude towards nature and the surviving historical monuments. Principal concern of the arts and crafts followers, among others, central in their ideology and ethos, was the quality of life for people. This attributed a pronounced ecocentric orientation to the movement's teachings, character, and art. In this respect, a strong bond was established between the natural world and tangible relics of previous epochs. For the followers of the arts and crafts, both shared the same origin, qualities, and served similar functions. They preserved the spiritual and served as carriers of the mystical in a gradually impersonal technological world. The arts and crafts teachings and ethos played a significant role in the Gothic and Byzantine revivals in late 19th century Britain. They greatly influenced the education, development, and training of Robert Wyatt Schultz and Sidney Barnsley, two young architects, students of the Royal Academy of Arts. Both were embedded in the movement's culture and had fully absorbed the teachings of John Ruskin and William Morris. They moved in the same circles as leading lights of the British arts and crafts, were trained as students of chief arts and crafts architects, such as the RA master Richard Fennes Pierce, recognized the likes of Philip Webb and William Letheby as their mentors, and served as assistants in the London office of Richard Norman Shaw. In the year 1887, Robert Wyatt Schultz won the most prestigious RA gold medal and a traveling studentship for £200. He was encouraged and directed by his mentors, William Letheby in particular, to travel to Greece and the Near East. Sidney Barnsley, his fellow apprentice at Shaw's office, would join him. They would depart for Greece for the first time in the autumn of 1887 as students of the newly founded British School at Athens, well prepared and with clear objectives for their expedition. The majority of the period's proto-scholars seemed to adopt a largely amateurish and rather loose approach towards surviving Byzantine antiquities in the Eastern Mediterranean region. The readership was rather low, and their recordings, as you can hear, were in constant dialogue with the surviving classical remains. Wyatt Schultz and Barnsley embarked their journey with genuine interest in the systematic, as faithful as possible recording of surviving Byzantine heritage. True to the arts and crafts ideals, besides architecture and art, Their interest would also be in the afterlife of the recorded buildings, their symbolism, significance, as well as their function. The intricate ways in which they seem to interact with people and the surrounding natural and built environment. Passing through Italy and the Ionian Islands, they finally reached Athens in March 1888. This first travel would set the foundations for a lifelong fascination and labor. More travels will follow, and the result was a unique and exceptionally valuable archival resource on Byzantine monuments in the Eastern Mediterranean, known as the Byzantine Research and Publication Fund Archive. Housed in the British School at Athens, it consists of approximately 1,500 drawings and 1,000 photographs created between 1888 and 1949, since the archive was enriched by other architects who followed, all students of the British School at Athens. It also includes numerous notebooks and the corporate records, which provide invaluable insights into the activities of these architects. Central among the guiding principles of the arts and crafts that inspired Sultan Barnsley's trip was a conscious response to nature, the natural environment. Its relation to historical association and survivals, in this case the Byzantine monument, was of primary interest to both. Their studies and appreciation of the recorded material was based exclusively on personal observation in an attempt to experience the actual state of the builder. They traveled extensively, even in remote regions of the Greek mainland and the Isles, spending days on site, meticulously studying and recording monuments, taking detailed notes, and producing a series of preliminary drawings, which they would finish and ink later. Nature, the natural surroundings, played a key role in their recordings. The direct observation and appreciation of nature per se, as a carrier of a wide array of meanings and an almost mystical allure, were particularly encouraged by the arts and crafts pioneers. The meticulous and accurate reproduction of architecture and the surviving monuments at the same time were favored equally to the faithful and almost scientific reproduction of details from the natural world. The BRF archive, here I'm showing you just a reproduction of a flower by in the BRF archive, and the same, an almost identical flower by John Ruskin. And here you can see detailed drawings by Weiersolz. The annotated drawing on the left identifies the various parts of the plant using their scientific names, and a similar drawing by Philip Webb. Weiersolz and Barnsley notebooks preserved between their leaves pressed plants and flower herbs, and here in this drawing they look very similar to some drawings by John Ruskin, the way they have been arranged. Even that had a particular significance for the arts and crafts followers. Nature had for the arts and crafts movement extraordinary physical and metaphysical qualities, ranging from the picturesque to the sublime. John Ruskin was an amateur botanist. All the arts and crafts followers draw extensively from nature. William Morris, William Lethaby, and later Charles Robert Ashby, like Ruskin, were fascinated by the natural environment, and during their architectural travels, their study travels, they draw and commented extensively on elements of foreign landscapes, comparing them to the English countryside. The roots of civilization were to be found in nature. For the arts and crafts followers, the origins of architecture were in the land. The value of architecture depended largely on the image it bears on natural creation. Morris urged the young apprentices to grasp the full sympathy between the works of man, architecture, and the land they were made for. The way architecture blended with the environment was particularly important in this respect. The BRF archive preserves a series of photographs that illustrate this arts and crafts approach. Castles, bridges, villages, surviving examples of domestic, secular, and religious architecture were appreciated and photographed as part of the broader natural surroundings, almost as natural elements and in absolute harmony with their physical environment, as if belonging to nature itself. Historical architecture, in particular, the ancient buildings, as they were called by the arts and crafts followers, were considered to be part of the land and of man. The monuments were beautiful to the degree they adjust to the site and take up the local manners of the built environment. Under this light, historical architecture had for the arts and crafts approach a strong sense of locality. Size and form really mattered. Specific architectural features depended on the particular climate. The building had to adjust to site, taking up local manners of the builders, as well as, if possible, local materials. Records of the BRF archive indicate that Weierstolz and Barnsley were very much interested in the way historical architecture, the Byzantine building in this case, blended with the natural environment. A series of impressive, in many cases, distant and closer views of Byzantine monuments from the BRF photographic archives focus on the natural environment that surrounds the monument, demonstrating the organic relations between the building and the natural setting. The churches, as you can see here, they appear almost as being engulfed by nature, as if created in the same manner and by the same materials, as if belonging to the place they stand. Not only the historic building as a whole was considered to belong to nature, but also its various individual parts were seen to develop following what the architects called the method of nature. Vice versa, plants were considered to develop as buildings, and trees were studied as architectural edifices. The parts of buildings were studied developing as trees. Comparisons were drawn between historic buildings and geological epochs. This, of course, had a great impact, a twofold impact. First of all, it encouraged the arts and crafts architects to encourage the systematic preservation of historic architecture as part of the natural landscape through the establishment of societies and bodies like the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings, founded by Morris in 1877, and the close study of various parts of the historic building, the Gothic and Byzantine church in particular, in relation to nature. The capital and the arts were at the very center of the arts and crafts exploitation of the Byzantine domical construction. The Byzantine arts has been interpreted by the architects of the movement, primarily Morris, as a principal carrier and signifier of originality, dignity, reason, and economy of form in architecture. The image of the capital, of the Byzantine capital in particular, became emblematic for the architects of the movement, serving in many cases as the frontispiece in major arts and crafts publications. As early as Ruskin, Byzantine capitals were also discussed in terms of their relation to nature. In the stones, these were seen as the most natural part of the Byzantine church and as demonstrating a greater love of nature than the Greek ones, and therefore being healthier and tending to greatness. The focus was on leaf decoration. Leaves were seen not as a mere decorative motif, but as Spears comments in his architecture, an organic part of the capital. Foliage on capitals was studied in botanical terms, and various capital categories were built based on this very distinction. Beauty and the aesthetic impact of the capital depended upon the natural impact of its leaves. Influenced by the teachings of their masters, the architects of the BRF archive meticulously recorded and exhaustively studied all the various forms and types of capitals available in the Byzantine churches that they studied. As expected, they focused particularly on the leaf decoration, the so-called system of foliation, according to Ruskin, producing rough sketches like this one from the Church of St. Dimitrios in Thessaloniki by Walter George, a follower of Varsal's and Barnsley, a student of the BRF Publication Fund. Preliminary pencil drawings, and of course final ink drawings, focusing on the capital and the capital's foliage and decoration. The capitals of the Thessaloniki Church of St. Sophia, of Hagia Sophia in particular, were considered to be extremely important, as Spears in his architecture comments, and these were the focus of a series of studies by the BRF architects. Here you are looking at a photo and a similar recording of the St. Mark capital, a similar capital from the Church of St. Mark's by John Ruskin. However, Spears considered the Thessaloniki, the St. Sophia capitals, even more important. Sidney Barnsley was obsessed with the Byzantine capital, and he chose to decorate the church that he designed in Lower Kensington with a Byzantine, actual Byzantine capital from the Studios monastery. William Lethaby also produced detailed drawings of Byzantine capitals with a focus on either the animals or the decoration, the leaf decoration of the capital, now in the North Devon archive, from various places, Constantinople here and maybe Thessaloniki. Now, besides the capital, cornices, lintels, and marble slabs, and various other continuous marble relief bands that typically decorate the Byzantine church were documented and studied by the arts and crafts architects in relation to nature. Both the marble slab and the continuous relief decoration, the horizontal continuous frieze, were examined in these studies. Here you're looking at an example. It is the lintel of the Little Metropolis Church, and a similar recording by Philip Webb from his Italian trip. Decoration like that attracted their interest, and later on, they reproduced similar designs in the buildings that they themselves constructed. It was used by the arts and crafts architects in their own designs. Here, just an example by William Lethaby. Decorative pieces like the capital, the cornice, the marble slab, and the directly inspired from nature, stimulated long discussions on another key issue of the arts and crafts aesthetic: imitation and copying, in particular, imitation as opposed to copying from nature. In the Seven Lamps of Architecture, Ruskin develops this idea, underlining that the purpose is not to imitate nature, but to give an indication of the structures and forms of nature. And it was Gothic art and Byzantine art who successfully managed to do that. To always understand and copy the process, never the forms of nature, Spears would also argue in his chapter, Imitation from Nature, from his History of Architecture. For the arts and crafts followers, to achieve this involved a certain conventionalization of nature, as they put it, a monotony of form, since rational growth was considered as one of the principal qualities of nature. This idea was particularly developed by William Morris, and this kind of monotony corresponding perfectly to another key principle of the arts and crafts aesthetics, a certain mysticism that the work of architecture should always aim to transmit, as well as the idea of the non finito, the unfinished artifact, that was particularly favored by the arts and crafts masters. The result of such an approach would be what Ruskin had termed as interwoven architecture. And it was in Byzantine churches that the BRF architects and the arts and crafts architects actually found all these elements. And here, just an example, the continuous growth of recurring patterns was used by the arts and crafts masters themselves in their own creation. Just an example here by Philip Webb, a decoration designed for plaster work. Soon, the arts and crafts pioneers, and William Morris in particular, would turn their interest and meticulously study also the art of the Byzantine mosaic. Byzantine mosaics were studied both in technical terms as well as for their relation to nature and their multiple significances. For Morris, it was the curved line that differentiated the Byzantine mosaic from that of previous epochs. Reflecting this attitude, the BRF archive contains faithful recording studies of a series of floral mosaics, some of the finest examples of the ornamentation of the Byzantine church. Principal concern of the BRF architects was the meticulous recording and study, particularly of the mosaic band. The decorative mosaic band had, that decorated the Byzantine church, had specific characteristics that made it particularly appealing to the arts and crafts followers. Those characteristics that it shared with nature. And these were natural growth of one member or pattern from the other, simple forms but with an inner complexity, color, softness of gradation, simple proportion, growing against any kind of imitation, but with inspiration from natural forms, and of course, they tend to acknowledge what they called the fitness of limitation. They very much admired the way mosaic bands in Byzantine churches followed the curved lines of architecture. They fitted to the space they were called to decorate. Mosaic, and to a lesser degree, marble relief animal figures or mosaic animal figures, had for the arts and crafts additional significances. The physical world, both the animals and the plants, as reproduced by the Byzantines in sculpture and mosaics inside the church interior, seem to have had particularly strong metaphysical connotation. And here you're looking at how John Ruskin interprets the presence of this particular motif in the Byzantine mosaic. Certain forms of ornament, which above all must be considered parts of pattern designing, are variations of the mystic symbols of the Holy Tree and of the Holy Fire, claims Morris in his History of Pattern Designing. These ornaments, according to the arts and crafts architects, have been preserved by the Persians and are to be found in the art of the Assyrians and the Greeks. Both the fire and especially the tree were considered by intellectuals of the movement as symbols of life and creation. Variations of the image of the tree acquired, particularly after the 16th century, growing popularity in the art of the West. Well before that, widely distributed in Byzantine and then medieval art, were the images of the tree, such as the tree with the Virgin and Prophets and the tree of Jesse. The mosaics in the Church of St. Paul within the walls, designed by George Street in the Gothic revival style, seem to directly reflect these. Designed by Sir Edward Burne-Jones in collaboration with Morris, and heavily influenced by the Byzantine mosaic cycles of Ravenna, place the tree at the very center of the program as a symbol of rebirth behind the image of the cross of crucified Christ. Equally, one of the most impressive reproductions preserved in the BRF archive is the tree with the Virgin and Prophets from the Catholicon of the Kessariani Monastery, executed by one of the most prolific copies of the era, the Swiss Émile Guilleron. An emblematic image in Byzantine art, the tree, symbolic image of the physical environment, is embedded with its pronounced place in the arts and crafts aesthetic with spiritual connotations and significances. And it is with the image of the tree that I will leave you today. I do very much hope that I have offered to you a panorama of the ways that, the intricate ways that the architects of the BRF, followers of the arts and crafts, studied Byzantine architecture and decoration in relation to nature. And if you wish to see more of these images, hopefully by the end of next week, the British School is going to make available a virtual exhibition of similar images if you need more information or more details about that. So thank you very much, Steve.